This one has been on my short list since the very beginning. It doesn't always mean something's a great game. It means there's something very interesting to show. In this case, this is a very interesting game with huge flaws. I don't have the magazine here on this side of the continent, at least not that I know of. I'm also missing a counter, which is under Villars there, the Fourth Army. However, I looked at the counter scan, and as with many things, this game is by 3W. They were notoriously bad, put out as a Wargamer issue. Their magazine game's even worse than their boxed games. This is a detachment. I'm going to use it as the Fourth Army. It's not on the counter scan, and that is not too surprising. I went up to look at the counter scan to make sure because, well, the weird thing is I didn't remember that I was missing a piece, but I also didn't remember that there was one just that didn't come with the game. Anyhow, this came out in a horrible period. I looked up the date for 1987, and I think I picked it up at a game store new because the topic was, so interesting. There really wasn't much on this era at the time. Nowadays, there's a lot more choices. Berg did a couple of battle games on it, and then when we look at there still aren't a lot of combat games on this era. Minis, there's mini stuff. But then when I looked at, and I know there are some now, I saw like Blenheim or something like that done. But also the No Peace Without Spain covers the same campaign period, if I recall correctly, which is a CDG representation. This is kind of an interesting time period because it's almost like a World War I type situation. You're going to see the trenches and such not here. In terms of like it being very, very difficult to penetrate through areas that were heavily defended. This game has some really, really intriguing rules to it. However, the rule book is horrible. Now, I looked... This is the official errata, and it is not enough. Well, the Franco-Bavarian army should use the number 4 magazine. Yeah, I don't have that either, do I? I'm not sure. Huh. Let's see, where are the Bavarians? Maybe that's... There it is. Okay. So we use this, I think, instead of the number 4 army. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. We may see some weird situations. The components are shitty. You can see, nowadays this shit just wouldn't fly, right? It didn't fly then either. The map is actually beautiful. However, this inset here doesn't do anything for you. It just, it shows you the different setup periods and where the lines would be, which can help you a little bit, but not much. The rule book is absolutely hideous. I think I said that, but I don't know. One of the things that brought this back to mind was that Gilbert Collins, who is he's rather used to games with bad rules, etc. I don't remember, I know he contacted me about it, but I don't remember if he, I don't think he did a video on it at all. But he basically gave up on it in the sense of, I couldn't figure out hide nor hair of it. So, for me, I don't know how much I had to make up of the rules. I've read through them. I don't have a great grasp, but I have some, and we'll try to work through them and work through the issues that are presented on them. This is not a game for someone who is used to modern games and wants, something that's out of the box perfect. Let's put it that way for certain. But it's also got some really interesting ideas around movement, which I find very appealing. Basically, you're going to have to roll to move your units. Kind of similar to what happens in the OSG Napoleonics operational games, where we did a couple of them. We did 1809. I know. I don't know how many we did, but where you can choose to pay to move your units or not, and you just roll for them. But here, you just roll. There's no supply payment of units, etc. And the leaders aren't necessarily very good. So let's take a look at what we've got, and the map is pretty. I think this is new designers. Do we have any credits on here? Yeah, we do. W.P. Guthrie, never heard of him before. Alan Poindexter as the developer. I wonder if that's actually a pseudonym, but just for various reasons. But yeah. Not a lot of names that are familiar to me here, but then again, I wasn't very familiar with 3W. Everything that I've gotten by them has been shit one way or another. Luckily on this one, it was the rules, which is not the worst. Base sequence of play, let's go over it here. French primary magazine phase, the French player can swap his magazines. Basically, for every one of your magazines comes with a depot as well. And basically, if you don't like where your magazine is, you can move your depot to a location, and then the magazine moves there. And it allows for a slow repositioning of supplies, and just one of the many clever things. French secondary magazine phase. French player may place his secondary magazine in any friendly hex. In the first one, you replace the secondary with the primary. French activity. So there's a little bit of delay in terms of you get to operate off your primary magazine, but you get to start setting up your secondary that can signal to your opponent and whatnot. French activity phase. The French player can activate forces, move, fight, and besieged. The Allied player is allowed to intercept. And then we do the mirror image of that for the Allies. And that's it for the sequence of play. A lot of the rules are like this, very, very sparse, not giving you much. The game goes based on the scenario. Movement penalties and desertion are levied during winter turns. Yeah, why is this here? It's like, whoa. I don't know. You're going to need paper and pencil for this game. Although there are these strength markers, they are not sufficient to represent the strengths of units on the board. And so, okay. The activity phase. Okay, no army or detachment can move unless its commander rolls his activation rating on a pair of dice. And we have a leader activation table. Not all the tables that are referenced in the rules actually exist. So here you look at the value of your leader, and it gives you a set of dice that they would need to activate for. Now, this is really kind of a shame. You wish that the number was like the die span or whatever, but I guess they couldn't get that to work properly. So, yep, you gotta reference that. It would be nice if, like, instead of 4 to 11, let's see, 2 is 1, 3 is 2, that's 3, right? So that's 3 more pips, basically 3 more out of 36, there's 3 more selections that are missing than if you had done 2 to 11. Well, 2 of those 3 could be taken out by the 11 itself. So if they had made a leader rating of 10 instead, you'd come very close to the same odds. You'd be getting 1 out of 36 more chances to activate than you would. Some of these others, though, I don't know. But anyway, They go with these die spans instead. I highly doubt that it was that carefully play tested and balanced, but who knows. Okay. A siege train doesn't need to be activated and can move on its own or accompanying a force. If an army is already on an enemy fortress hex, it does not need to roll for activation in order to undertake a siege. All forces roll to activate before any movement is done. How you mark which units can actually move, I don't know, maybe tilt them or something. I really don't know. There's no markers for it or anything. Movement is assumed to be contemporaneous. This is not quite the right word, but okay. A force which fails to make its activation roll, though, is allowed to withdraw. It can move up to its full movement allowance towards any friendly fort, provided that it does not enter an enemy-occupied hex. Basic movement. These are rules that basically tell you that you follow the terrain effects chart and you do stuff like you would in a normal war game. You know, following the hex grid and whatnot. There's not a hell of a lot there to talk about. But there are some interesting things, which is you can split some units off from your main force. They can't keep moving unless the commander that they receive makes a command roll afterwards. So, you know, if I have an army, I can split a detachment off. A new leader is drawn at random for that detachment. Might be someone more important than the leader that you had on the army. And then you roll to see how they operate there. Detachments. Armies can freely divide, split off detachments, absorb other forces, and operate together, except as restricted through political considerations. These units have the same movement status as their parent force. And here they give the example. Villeroy activates, advances 3 hexes, splits off a detachment, drawing Marcin. This may be the only place where this is actually spelled out. And moves 5 hexes north. The detachment may move 5 hexes itself, its remaining movement, if Marcin can get an activation. So, luckily there aren't going to be a lot of pieces on the board. Although there's room for a fair amount, right? Like, you know, there's 10 French detachments plus 4 armies on the board right now, one of which may be Bavarian. We're not sure. It's not listed as such. But anyway. Terrain costs, nothing too exciting here, but a couple specials. It costs an extra movement point to cross a major river, which is spelled out good. But also the Scheldt and the islands here, you can move among them as, let's see, the British or Dutch up to 50 strength points, forces totaling up to 50. Can cross them as if they're major rivers. The French and Imperials cannot cross them. Now, up to 50 total, the way that's worded, I'm saying, you know, if you have 2 forces, they have to stay, that are both moving, they have to combine to be under, 50 or less. Action costs, movement costs are levied for certain actions. Fighting a battle costs a movement point. Besieging a fortress costs 6. Exiting an enemy fortress costs an additional movement point. Building a fortified line, that's these things, costs 7. Building a strong point, that's this, costs 8. Dismantling or repairing a fortress costs 8. These are all summarized on the action point cost table. This is, I think, one that doesn't exist. These are all scenarios. Yep. Does not. Maybe here. Nope. Alrighty. Now, they do spell out in the errata that, yeah, we left some things off, but no biggie. It's necessary to move into an enemy hex and pay the costs in order to battle a force or to lay siege to a fort. A force cannot move into or through a hex occupied by an enemy force without a battle. It may enter such a hex as the last move of a turn. A hostile fort... what that's meaning to say, that last sentence, I don't know. think it's just sort of a consequence of what else is here. The fact that you can't move through. A hostile fortress hex may be moved through as long as additional movement point is spent to leave. Battles are fought between the hostile forces on the same hex, but it costs a movement point for the moving or intercepting force. Both sides roll on the combat results table. We got one of them. The combat system in this is going to be a percentage of your own forces. Kind of reminiscent of something like Empires in Arms, but without morale. You find a percentage. This factor is multiplied by the friendly factor total to determine the enemy's losses. Fractions of 0.25 or greater are rounded up. That's weird. Smaller fractions are rounded down. If a force takes losses in excess of 15% of its own, it routs. You're going to have paper and pencil to handle these combats just like you would in EIA or Europa Universalis, because you're going to have to keep track. Like, you have to know the original amount and stuff like that. It just makes life easier to have scratch sheets for this, in addition to the strength that's actually there. You might be able to do it all on a calculator. If both sides take such losses, the force receiving the higher loss routes. What's higher? Is that numerical or percentage-wise? Dunno. Shall we look? Not on here. Yeah, the errata. I don't know if this was particularly early errata, but this is all I had, and I didn't go looking to see if there was anything more. I mean, I printed this out in the late 90s, so yeah. If neither force routes, the moving player may move on or renew the battle to the limit of their movement allowance. So I guess you can keep spending movement points to continue fighting. Now, the moving player can continue. Let's see if there's anything more, but it seems to me that, like, if an interceptor hits you, fights a round of battle, it's up to the moving player to decide whether, not the interceptor, to decide whether to continue the battle. The defender may attempt to retreat between each action. Well, that's a little weird because we're not sure who the defender is, but okay. Leader effects on combat. Leader, I'm assuming the defender is whoever didn't pay for the combat. I'm not sure how reasonable this is. Maybe the intercepting player gets to keep fighting rounds of combat. Leaders may modify the outcome by adding their battle modifier to their force's die roll. Negative modifiers always reduce their force's roll. If both sides have a positive modifier, you subtract the smaller from the larger, and the difference is used as a modifier for the better leader only. If a force takes losses, the inflicting opponent rolls a die for each leader on the side which received a loss. He'll probably almost always take losses, unless you get a die roll of 0. A roll of 1 returns the leader to the pool. In addition, after the force is routed, a 1 on a second die roll captures the force's leaders. A leader or leaders may stop a rout in his own force by rolling his positive battle modifier or less on a single die. What does that mean? Stop a rout when, where, you know? Again, not entirely clear. Right now, my working assumption is if you rout, you immediately have a chance to prevent it, based on the leader. A routed force is subject to pursuit. A free battle roll is made by the victor's surviving force using all relevant modifiers. The losses of the routed force resulting from this roll are all prisoners. The routed force must retreat under normal restrictions and is demoralized. Demoralization lasts for 1 to 6 turns according to the losses suffered as a percentage of the original strength of the force. See demoralization table. Yeah? Really? I don't think that one exists either. I don't remember this being this broken. See demoralization table. Very interesting. Here we go. It's built into the combat results table. It is not its own table. Place a number chip under the force leader's counter to indicate the remaining turns of demoralization. Now this is funny because these are listed as strength point markers, if I recall correctly. Yeah, they're strength markers over here. Okay. Where are we there? What did we hit here? Demoralized forces reduce their activation value by 2, not below 4, and modify their battle roll by -1. And you'll see these parenthesized values here. No leader has a leader value less than 6, so demoralized forces are what get that really bad activations. Leader alleviating demoralization. Demoralization can be alleviated by adding fresh forces from outside. For every undemoralized group of strength points numbering 25% of the demoralized factors, which is added to the force, the duration of the demoralization is reduced by 1 turn. Thus, if a detachment of 12 fresh SPs was combined with an army of 16 and was demoralized for 4 more turns, the new 28 strength point army would only be demoralized for 1 more turn. I think that's wrong. So 25% of the demoralized duration is reduced by 1 turn. So we were demoralized for 4 turns. We added a force that's 3/4 the size. It's acting as if that does 3 steps of repair in the example, which is not what the rules say. The rules say it does 1 turn. We'll go with the example there, because why would they write that otherwise? If due to loss or optional rule 13.7, we're probably playing with optional rules just to make life even more interesting, but let's see what that is. 13.7. Relief of commission. Yeah, we're playing with all those. These are some of the additional political rules, and they're really cool. I like my Chrome, man. The defeated commander is replaced by a new commander drawn blindly from the pool, not an existing officer, and the duration of the demoralization is reduced by a turn for having put a new leader in, no matter how bad. Terrain may modify the combat result. Force attacking over a minor river gets a -1 modifier on the die roll. Let's see. Hey, we got this here. Cool. A force attacking from over a major river must use only 1/4 of its total force in the action. If this attacker fails to rout, the river is considered crossed and the modifier is not used in subsequent actions. What I think that means is you fight 1 round of battle with the modifier against you. We'll see, because there's other things which work kind of this way. The fortified lines, for example, work kind of similarly. A fortified line or strong point acting as a section of line incurs a -1 modifier on any attacker. This is added to any terrain effect. Such a line gives an automatic activation for a friendly force within 4 movement points. However, this force, although intercepting, is considered the defender behind the line. If an attacker fails to rout, the line is considered breached and removed. If the defender has not suffered any loss, the garrison is absorbed into the defending force. So, by my look at this, you can't attack a fortified line. You can't move into a fortified line that has a potential interceptor within 4 movement points, because they would be defending, and unless you have the extra movement point to spend for the fight. An attacker may attempt to penetrate and bypass the line, and it says penetrate and fortify lines and rivers. The battle modifier is subtracted from the attacker's, I guess the defender's battle modifier, and the result is in turn compared to the defender's activation value on the penetration table. Well, gosh, that's another one that doesn't seem to exist here. Got a siege table. Leader activation. Okay, well, we'll see. Because we got through this We found the demoralization table. It's part of the combat results table, strangely. If the attacker makes his roll, he penetrates the line before the defender arrives. The defender has the option to stand. Let's just make sure. 4.69. No. I'll show you here. During the development of Marlborough, we decided to dispense with the number of charts. Yeah, great, thanks, man. Unfortunately, references to these were left in the rules, creating certain understandable bewilderment in the minds of players. Happily, most players seem to have realized that this was, in fact, no missing information. Okay. You should keep track of army and detachment strengths on a scratch pad. Use the markers alongside RIT 10 unit designations. Okay. Off-board economic values are indicated on the map with possible modifications. Okay, so far we do not have anything that helps us with this penetration table. But we'll see. The defender has the option to... okay. If the attacker makes his roll, he penetrates the line before the defender arrives. The defender has the option to stand without the use of the line modifier or retreat. Minor rivers or the two combined may be bypassed in the same way. Major rivers cannot be bypassed in this fashion. If an attacker attempts to penetrate a line and fails, he can disengage and return through the same hex he entered by expending an additional movement point, or he may attack the line in the normal manner. The intercepting player may still attack, but he will not receive any modifiers for his fortified line or river. The original attacker may still attempt to retreat if intercepted. Oh boy, there's a whole lot to unpack there. But I think it can all be parsed out in a way that makes some sense. Which is to say, anything that's kind of hinted at, you just have to accept happens, right? So if I'm crossing a minor river, which look, how can we tell the difference? Well, the Rhine is definitely major, and this is definitely major. So I'm guessing that at some point or another they turn minor. I mean, it looks very distinguished, very different between this hex and this hex. Not so sure about that hex, right? It's kind of like, yeah, that's sort of in between, isn't it? Oh, well. But it's pretty. All right. Example. Oh, maybe this will help, because elsewhere we needed examples. First French army under Villars is on a fortified line hex. The British army under Marlborough resolves to penetrate the line. Oh, good. Villars' modifier, +2, is subtracted from Marlborough's +3, and the remainder, +1, is compared to Villars' activation number. Okay, so that's a little different. Leader activation. So let's see, what is Villars' activation number? Villars is a 9, his activation number is 4 to 11. So, again, the example is telling us something different. There's not that chart, and we're using something else. If Marlborough rolls a 5 through 12, okay, so this is 4 through 11, +1 to each gives me 5 through 12. What does that make sense of? If Marlborough rolls a 5 through 12, he better be screwed. He fails, yes, and must storm the line or disengage. If he rolls a 2 through 4, though, he's penetrated the line, and Villars must fight without it or attempt to retreat. Even if Villars wins such a fight, the line is broken, and its factor must be reabsorbed by the army. However, a strong point could remain, although no longer as part of the line. If a defender retreats from a strong point, it can be left behind as an isolated fort. It may then be besieged as if it were a second-class fortress. Or it can be attacked normally at a cost of 1 movement point. The attacker incurs a -3 modifier. Okay. There's only 1 strength point there, so that shouldn't be too big a deal. At least normally. There might be a detachment there. Supply effects on combat. Any force outside of a magazine range incurs a -1 modifier. To what? I mean, like, is that to the leader stuff, or is it just to the combat results table die rolls? I don't know. I'm going to go with the latter, but I don't know. Siege train capture. A siege train alone on a hex or accompanying a routed force may be destroyed or captured by the victor. Place it in the prisoner pile off board. We have a full example of combat. Let's take a look and see if there's anything too disturbing here. I don't think the first example is necessary. Villars and Boufflers are behind a line at Malplaquet with 80 factors, Marlborough and Orange. And let's make sure we're not looking at one of these. 4.613, that's this. Villeroy, the earlier example had an error in it apparently. Marlborough, Eugene, and Orange, their three armies totaling 110 enter an attack. The French value is 8 plus 2. Why? I don't know. We don't know that yet, but there's some kind of averaging happening between Villeroy and Boufflers, I believe. And the Allied 8 plus 1, let's take a look. We've got 9, 9, and 7 is sort of 8, sure. And then plus 3, plus 2, and plus 1 is 5. 4 divided by 3 sounds like somewhere between 1 and 2. Sure, 1, fine. Minus the line for being 8, 0. Okay, so here's the thing. Remember when I said it would come off here? I'm wrong. The example shows that it's actually off the leader values, which is a different thing, because the leader values sometimes, like if they're both positive, they reduce the attacker value, the superior officer value, as opposed to just being applied to the die roll. Okay. So then, what do we got here? The Allies roll a 5. That is 10%. Is it? This is the demoralization table here. Okay. Okay, so we roll a 5. That's 10%. It looks like 20 to me, but okay. Sure. I'm not going to change the chart. For 11 French dead, 110 times 10%. Yeah, I get the 110 times 10%, except I see 20% on a 5. But I don't care. The French roll a 7. That is 7 plus 2 equals 9. How'd they roll a 7? I mean, I'm serious. I'm rolling a single die here. What kind of die am I supposed to use? Is it a 10-sider? Because how did I roll a 7? Yeah, I don't see anything that convinces me. I am becoming more and more convinced that this example is just as foobar as the last one. Let's take a look. The second example should read the Allied 8-2 minus the line for 8 minus 1. Oh, that's not good. Oh, that's not good at all if it's 8 minus 2. I don't know, man. Subtract the Allied value to give the French 8-1. Yeah, so I think they're putting dashes in here that should be pluses. The Allies roll 2, that is 10%. Yay! The French roll a 6, good, that's not a 7. That is 6-1-7. What? Okay, so the errata is even worse. Like, maybe it corrects something, but it's not understandable. But this is also just false. Clearly, they didn't have any kind of, quality control on all of this. Let's keep looking, though. After the combat, the Allies roll a 1, their combined command value, preventing the rout. Okay, their combined command value is not... I don't know. I'm jumping because we don't have a breakdown of the components here. I don't know what the two values are called. But this is going to be the combat modifier value, not whatever this is up here, the leader value, I guess they're calling it. Okay. Preventing the rout. The French roll a 3, 6, and 5, failing to harm the Allied generals. They would have needed 1s. The Allies roll a 3 for Boufflers and a 1 for Villars. who returns to the pool. The Allies offer another attack, but Boufflard elects to attempt a retreat and succeeds with an 8. A 9 would have failed. Why? I don't know. We can look back. Boufflard is a 7. His command had an 8 average value, which seems to say the 8 and 9 would have worked. But we just lost our leader. Valar is gone. So would he still count in? I mean, does that make sense? And my feeling is I should either be pulling a replacement immediately or should just be using Boufflard. I don't know. However, that is not what the example shows, but I don't know if I care about examples because they've already proven themselves to be very, very ugly. Okay. So, the Allies retain 6 movement points, so you're going to have to keep track of movement points as you're moving. And since they are contemporaneous, that's not the word they used, is it? Yeah. No, they said cotemporaneous, not contemporaneous. That's the difference. There we go. Okay. Since they're contemporaneous, my feeling is that you can stop moving something and move something else, right? And so you may have to have markers all over the map to indicate the movement point allowances that you've used on various units. These will work, you know, the strength point markers that are not used for that. Okay. A defending force about to be attacked may retreat up to its full allowance away if its leader can activate. It may not enter any enemy-occupied hex unless it's an enemy-held fortress that is besieged or blockaded, nor can it exit by its opponent's entry hex. The attacker does not pay a 1 movement point penalty for the battle. The retreated force is penalized in its next move for each movement point used. Place a number marker on the force to indicate this. So this is kind of important. These markers are used for 2 things. One, they're used for demoralization, which is put under the leader. Kind of hard to see there. The second is being used for movement points already expended, which is put on top. I think I would reverse that, to be honest, because a demoralized force should have like some kind of marker. I may find myself some other markers to use for this game, just because, first of all, I hate these kind of markers. But the multi-usage is troublesome to begin. Okay. So now what's interesting here is the retreat is allowed to be done when a defending force is about to be attacked, right? The French chose to retreat after the battle. So it's when it's about to be attacked, regardless of how many rounds the battle has gone. Like, if the battle hasn't started, you can do it, but you can also do it at other times. And I'm guessing after each round of combat, you get to make a new activation roll to try to run away. Strongholds abandoned in combat. That's not where we are. Interception. When a force moves within interception range, 4 movement points. Now, this has to be looked at kind of carefully because, right. Clear is 1 movement point. Okay, rough is 3. Yeah. So, for the most part, everything's 1 movement point. Even if it has what look like trees, those aren't. That's cultivation level of, well, it's forage level of the areas. Okay. This is going to have some similarities with, I fear, Imperium Romanum. But the size of the armies that can forage is not bad at all. You can look at the stacking value. Without a magazine is 20, 40, 50. With a magazine within range, it gets significantly higher. At least it won't be stuck on the roads or tiny, tiny stacks. Where are we here? If you move within interception range of an enemy force or forces, those forces can roll to activate for an interception. All forces that will be involved in the interception must be declared before the activation is rolled on any of them. A force that moves onto a fortified hex within the interception range of an enemy force will automatically activate that force. Well, if it wants to be. The interceptor is committed to battle even if not all of the designated forces arrive. Battle costs a movement point and must be paid by the interceptor, but not the interceptee. The interception takes place immediately after the moving player enters the hex where the interception occurred before any attacks or other actions by the moving player. So 4 movement points away, if you fight a battle, that's a 5th movement point that you're spending at that point then, I guess. After each battle, the interceptee may continue his move proceeding to a new hex, or even attacking the interceptor, assuming neither routes. If he attacks the interceptor retains his option to retreat. The moving force may be intercepted more than once by the same interceptor as long as he's within interception range, and the interceptor still has movement from his next move left. Units may not intercept through an enemy fortress or hexes adjacent to it, enemy strong points, or enemy fortified hex. They may intercept into hexes adjacent to fortresses, but not into enemy fortresses, strong point, or fortified line hexes. All intercept movement is deducted from the intercepting force's next move, as in retreat. Place a number marker on the unit to keep track. Alright, I'm pretty tired at this point. I know we're not at what looks like a particularly huge thing, but it is a second level number with sieges, and I got no trust of these rules. So 4 goes down to here. I am going to take a bit of a break because I really need it at this point. Alright, onward and upward. Sieges. Sieges are conducted against enemy fortresses on the same hex, and they cost 6 movement points. Okay. The besieging force has to have at least 2-to-1 odds against the total garrison, that is the organic garrison plus any supplementing forces. All units participating in the siege roll must have 6 movement points to expend. Now these have a number in them. Yeah. And the organic garrison is within that, so that's what you have to have 2-to-1 if there's no additional forces. All right. Fortresses are 2 classes, first and second. Each has an organic intrinsic garrison which cannot move out of the fortress. The siege table for the appropriate class is consulted and a die is rolled. We have this table. Looks awfully complicated, but it uses 2 dice. I guess these use 1, which goes with some of the corrections and whatnot. And we have different results here: besieger loss, defender loss, surrender, honors of war offered, and then some modifiers. Looks pretty simple. Let's see if there's anything fancy, but I don't think so. A die is rolled, the result modified by the size of the total garrison. Yeah, we got a whole bunch of modifiers there. The ratio of SP of the attacker and defender, presence and absence of siege trains, quality of the defender's leader. Siege results will indicate if the attacker or defender loses an SP. So that'll be like the D here, or the A up here. If a surrender or honors of war are granted. An S means that the fortress is handed over and the total garrison is taken prisoner. An HW means that all garrison units are removed at once to the nearest friendly force or fortress, defender's choice. An attacker may declare an HW result in hopes, in hopes of a later S. If a fortress falls by an S, an HW, or elimination of the garrison, the victor gains control, places a control counter. That's these little flags, not these. These little flags here. And deducts strength points from its force equal to the organic garrison size to form his organic garrison. These are not going to be considered losses. Do we have to track losses? Maybe. If an attacker breaks off a siege, any losses suffered by the organic garrison are automatically replaced at no cost to anyone. The organic garrison suffers losses only after all supplementary strength points are lost, and we may use these for that.
A fortress may be blockaded by a force equal to or greater than its total garrison. A besieged or blockaded fortress cannot block supply lines in adjacent hexes or its own. Blockade does not harm the fortress. We have some examples of movement here. And interception. I think they're pretty clear from the rules as written, to tell you the truth. And some more here. Leaders in organization. Every moving... Did we get everything we need from that? Maybe, I don't know. Every moving force must have a leader. Static forces such as fortresses, fortified lines, and strong points do not. A leader has an activation value and a combat modifier. Neither of which is the command value or the leader value. I mean, they are those two. So, the leader value is the activation. The combat modifier is what was called the command value. Which left me, it could apply to either. It was such an ambiguous sounding term. But it's not the one used here. A leader cannot be removed from his command except by a loss in battle, or in the command game interface, or by optional rules. If a new leader is needed because of a loss or a detachment, the new leader is drawn blindly from the appropriate leader pool. I'm going to have to bring my cups down. I knew this before. If two forces combine, their leaders are co-commanders of the new forces. If they separate later, the original army commander retains his army. If two or more armies or two or more detachments are in the same hex, they may cooperate as a single force under co-commanders, but they must remain together for the turn if they co-activate. But they can be slurped up by the larger more important force. If an army and a detachment are in the same hex, the detachment may be subordinated to the army and move and fight as if part of the army. There's some exceptions here, using the army leader value only. Co-commanded forces use the average of the leader's value, both for activation and combat. Fractions of 0.25 or more are rounded up. This is so weird. Lesser fractions rounded down. We give an example which we don't want to read because it might be wrong. Armies and detachments are made up of strength points. Their size is kept track on the unit strength charts. Not provided. Strength points may be redistributed between forces. Forces combined and detachments split off, except as limited by scenario and political restrictions. An army may be any size, subject to stacking limitations, but a detachment may not exceed 15 strength points. An army cannot separate a detachment of more than half its current strength. Each army has its own magazines. Detachments can draw supply from any eligible magazines. If a force does not have a leader and none can be drawn or are eligible to be drawn, use a value of 6 minus 2. Unlikely. There are a fair amount of leaders for each nation. Fortifications. Fortified lines. And that's these suckers. These are static defenses or detachments. They may be set up or built in friendly hexes during play. Each has an intrinsic strength of 1, which must be deducted when you build it. They can be freely reabsorbed into any eligible detachment or army. If an enemy should attack into a fortified line, any friendly force within activation range may be automatically activated. Such hexes may be linked into lengthy lines. I'm not sure what that matters, but Strong Point is a small temporary fortress. They're set up or built, and each has an intrinsic strength of 1, which must be deducted from the building force. They may be incorporated as a hex in a fortified line. 2 strong points may not be adjacent in a fortified line, which to me just means they can't be adjacent. Because it's not like there's any special case about adjacent hexes in a line and whatnot. 2 strong points may not be adjacent. If the strength point garrisoning a line or strong point hex should move away, the line or strong point is removed. So you could create a detachment or something and just wander away, I guess. Fortresses are permanent features on the map and cannot be built. However, they can be dismantled and repaired. If a player cannot or will not occupy a captured fortress, he may dismantle it at a cost of 8 movement points. It's considered an open city then. Do we have open cities? We do. They have no effect. Except any victory point value they might have. Either player can repair that fortress by occupying it, expending 8 movement points, and placing a necessary organic garrison. When you dismantle... See, I don't think you can dismantle a fortress... So this is a little weird. There doesn't appear to be any rule for dismantling a fortress outside of a siege situation, but then here we have dismantle or repair a fortress costs 8 movement points. I think you can dismantle a fortress for movement points, even though it's not spelled out here, in order to grab its intrinsic garrison, and you just turn it into an open city. Okay. And you have to expend the garrison whenever you rebuild it. A fortress cannot be incorporated as part of a fortified line, but such a fortified line can be built in the hex of a friendly fortress. A strong point cannot be erected on a fortress. A detachment or small army may reinforce a fortress or strong point. No such reinforcement can exceed double the organic garrison strength of the position. Now, you might say to yourself, well, wait, if I have that interception capability, why would I build a fortified line there? Fortified line, if you recall, gives an additional defensive bonus. I don't believe it's spelled on the terrain effects chart. Supply, store, forage, and stacking. There are 3 types of forage areas: fertile, good, and average. Fertile, good, average. The stacking limit for total fortresses based on whether you have magazines or not. We went over that. A siege train is treated as 5 strength points for stacking purposes. Half of all strength points in excess of the limit are lost due to desertion and attrition at the end of each player turn. Don't do it. I wonder if you round up on 0.25, It's just such a weird thing. There are 2 kinds of magazines, primary and secondary. Each army has one of each attached to it. The British is an exception with 2 secondary magazines. That just allows them to have a more flexible supply situation. Only the primary magazine has any supply effect. In the first phase of each player turn, a player may replace any secondary magazine with its primary counterpart. In the following phase, the secondary may then be placed on any friendly hex. To have any supply effect, the primary magazine must be able to trace a line of unblocked hexes to an unbesieged friendly economic value hex. I believe these are economic value hexes. These are the off-map ones, but the French don't have an off-map one. We'll get to that in a moment. The British trace to any friendly coastal fortress. The Austrians may trace offboard to Vienna. An economic value hex cannot be used instead of a magazine directly. A secondary magazine is just a depot in preparation. It doesn't have any purpose other than that. Yeah, economic value hex. French and Allied value. Okay. So like Brussels goes 15 either way. Munich is pro-French, but the Austrians can absorb it. It's interesting. Okay. What does that value mean? I don't think anything except for victory points. The supply range of a primary magazine is 5 movement points. Each army must be supplied by its designated magazine. Detachments can use any magazine of their same nationality. Supply lines are blocked and hexes occupied or adjacent to enemy forces not involved in combat or sieges or unbesieged unblockaded fortresses. Fortified lines and strong points block supply lines in the hex they occupy only. Supply lines may always be traced through hexes containing a friendly force, fortress, fortified line, or strong point. A fortress may be blockaded by a force equal to the total garrison of that fortress. The organic garrison of a fortress and any supplementary forces within them is considered supply only when actually inside the fortress. Supplementary garrison is... I don't know if you lose supply by sallying, if that's what it's saying, because it's kind of problematic. Like, you think you should be allowed to sally, fight, and then if you win, now you've got possible supply problems. Supplementary garrison forces may not exceed double the organic garrison size. No siege may be undertaken by an army outside its primary magazine supply. If two armies combine, the magazines combine, and those of one are removed. If one army separates into two, a new set of magazines is added. We're almost done with these rules. They don't seem that complicated, right? I mean, they're horribly presented. They're very, very short, though, and I do feel like we have a workable game here, to tell you the truth, with all the problems. Winter stacking and supply. During winter turns, stacking of all sorts is halved, except for garrisons, which are unaffected. In addition, there's and I think that might be supplementary garrisons as well. In addition, there is a mandatory desertion rate of 10% per force per turn for all forces not in winter quarters during winter turns. Troops in winter quarters may simply be removed from the board before any winter turn, or at that time distributed among friendly fortresses as supplementary garrisons under the usual limits. Magazines alone in an enemy-occupied hex may be destroyed at no cost. The owning player replaces them in his following turns in the normal manner. I gotta break a little bit, just get a little smoke and whatnot. I should have said earlier on when they first started introducing this, I'm not sure I've ever finished a game of this. There are things I really like about it, but I get the feeling it's a long game, and I get the feeling that I've played it and gotten bored. I just didn't want to finish it up. Now, maybe an automatic victory or something happened. I don't remember playing the full length of the Grand Campaign, which feels a little odd to me. I may be wrong. All right. Political limitations. Allied nationality restrictions. The British, Dutch, and Imperial armies are separate and must remain so. No leader can command another nationality except as co-commander with cooperating forces. Armies can only form detachments of their own nationality. The British may not reduce their army below 20 strength points for any reason other than battle, siege, or garrisons. I guess organic garrisons. A detachment can only draw supply from a magazine of its own nationality. If a detachment of one nationality is cooperating with an army of another, its commander is treated as if he were an army commander also, and his value will be used for that average leadership value. The Northern Allies. The Northern Allies detachments, that's this, may serve under any army, British, Dutch, and Imperial, and use their magazines. These allies use Imperial leaders. The Imperials. Their detachments can be absorbed by friendly armies, but once they become that army. Units in fortresses, fortified lines, and strong points may be absorbed by any friendly force regardless of their original nationality. This does not apply to supplementary garrisons, which are national detachments and will be on the board. French nationality. French forces may freely intermix regardless of nationality, except when prohibited by scenario. Now, the French have Bavarians with them and Spaniards. This may be why that Bavarian army and the Fourth Army are interchangeable, essentially. Victory conditions. At the end of each normal scenario, we'll be doing the campaign, but victory points are accorded by this point value here. Losses are of importance. Leader losses are important. Siege trains are of value. Economic value hexes are of importance. open cities are of a value that's less than the value of a fortress. The fortress has its full garrison value as victory points. An open city is only worth 1. So you probably want to garrison fortresses. Only enemy stuff counts. Whoever has the most victory points wins. Now we're playing the Grand Campaign, but it starts with the Miss Rhine campaign. Starts in April 1st. Plays primary magazines with the armies. Ooh, I didn't do that yet. Do not play secondary magazines. Marlborough replaces Athlon July 1st. So I ought to find myself a Marlborough. Put him there to remember. Elector of Bavaria enters the war September 1st with 12 and a siege train at Donawa. Okay, well. I'll just put him on the board. Let's see. September 1. All Bavarians, therefore, thereafter are friendly to the French. Dutch detachment in Maastricht is a supplementary garrison and cannot move until a leader is drawn for it or another force absorbs it. That's this force. Both sides may begin with detachments from their forces in friendly fortresses. I will not do that because I can detach at will. Okay. Nothing special for victory points for that first scenario, but that's not what we're playing. There are more rules. Campaign game starts with the 1702. The sequence is repeated every campaign season. Campaign season start determination. The first turn of every campaign season, except the first one, is determined by rolling a die and checking on this chart to see when you can start fighting. Successive game terms are played until the end of August 2nd. The duration of each campaign season is then determined at the end of August 2nd. A die is rolled and the following chart is consulted, and that can take you up into November 1. Well, if those are the only turns I play, why do I have to worry about winter quarters? Winter comes here, right? In January, right after January 2. There must be something more. This indicates the last turn in the campaign season. Players may move after this time using winter rules until the end of January 2. Players desiring to avoid winter penalties may remove their units to winter quarters. Such units are either removed from the board or placed inside fortresses. They are not penalized in the turn that they enter winter quarters, but they cannot move out until the next campaign season. The normal strength point limit for a fortress is doubled for winter quarters. Strong points and fortified lines are not affected by winter, but the field forces cannot benefit from their presence. However, a strength point could hold 4 SP for winter quarters as if it were a fortress. You know, let's just contradict the next sentence, what we just said. But once all forces are in winter quarters, the interphase begins. Each interphase is conducted according to the following sequence. I didn't read this part, did I? The players determine the ownership of territory and fortresses. Maybe I did. The players exchange prisoners and captured leaders. Each player may attempt one coup de main. The players may use economic points to build new units. Then they redeploy their forces. And they assign leaders to forces. Okay. When all forces are in winter quarters, the players determine the new front line. The priority is given for the ownership of each hex. Control of a fortress on the hex, control of a strong point or fortified line, control of the closest fortress, strong point, or fortified line, ownership of the hex in the last interface. That last one's going to be hard. There's no easy way to remember that. We're going to have to guess as best we can because I'm not going to make little maps and color things out, and I'm not going to figure out some way of marking. You know, I could put a plastic on that and mark it up, but okay. An open hex or hex group not adjacent to a fortress, strongpoint, or fortified line which cannot trace a supply route through friendly territory to a friendly economic area ceases to be friendly and changes ownership. All territories on a player's side of the new front line are considered friendly in the next campaign season, except isolated fortresses, strongpoints, and environs. After the first year of the war, the size of armies and forces are determined by the economic power of the two sides. Now, it's possible that what I found was that you couldn't build reasonable armies after the first year. I have a big worry about that. Something seems to there seems to be some sort of memory in my head that there was something wrong, and that may be why I gave up playing. That this game needed a fix here. Which would not be shocking. Okay. Certain fortress cities and towns have an economic value, bearing their worth to the possessing side. The first number is the value to the French. The second is the value to the Allies. During the interphase, the armies are supported and rebuilt on this basis. Each side totals its values and expends them thusly. Now, I can tell you one thing right off the bat. There's no off-board French points. However, there is Paris. The thought could be that if Paris falls, that's pretty much it, and France is in a lot of trouble. It's worth 75 points, which is more than Austria's worth. It's more than England's worth. It's, So, that Paris itself may count as all the off-board territories that France owns as well, with just the idea that if you can take Paris, France is in trouble. Okay. The armies are supported and rebuilt on this basis. Each side totals its values and expends them thusly. All right. So existing forces only cost 1 each. Build and maintain new costs 2 each. Let's take a look at what we have for points for the French. So they start with 45, 55, 65, 70, 80. 80 points of armies and 2 siege trains. Siege trains cost 5 or 10. It looks like a reasonable amount. I don't think that's going to be the problem. Okay. Each army has its own cost as well. The British have 2 secondary magazines. Yes, so what? Off-board economic point values. Certain countries, Britain, Austria, and the Northern Allies have off-board points which cannot be captured. The Austrians is increased to 30 in and after 1708 because of the end of the war in Italy, and increases to 50 in and after 1711. So, I don't know what's up with this. I think it starts at 20, goes to 30, which isn't marked, and then goes to 50. Existing SPs must be maintained before new ones are raised. Armies and siege trains can be freely raised or disbanded. Only field forces need be maintained, not organic garrisons in fortresses. If there's not sufficient points to maintain a field force, 1/2 of the unpaid strength points are lost, and you won't be buying any new ones. Worse than that, you won't have a field force. Like, you won't have an army, because you can't afford it. Well, I guess you could maintain. I don't know. I don't know what it means to maintain, because the army probably is. The winter quarters remove the army markers from the map along with the detachments for the most part. So yeah, I don't know. Unneeded economic value can be saved for later turns. Economic points may only be spent during the interphase. It's kind of neat that you can save money if you end up with too big an army by your captured areas. Captured units must be exchanged during the interphase. Strength points are exchanged 1 for 1, as are leaders. Odd leaders equal 1 strength point or 1 economic point ransom. You have to give the leaders back, I guess. Odd strength points are ransom for 1 economic point each. Players may not return strength points or leaders, even Marlborough. Retain. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I was like, well, how about that? I could keep somebody like Marlborough who's important, right? Nah. big difference in word in a couple of letters there, right? Siege trains are destroyed on capture, but the captive player earns an economic point during the interphase for it. It's not given to them by the loser, though. Armies, detachments, fortified lines, and strongpoints may then be deployed or redeployed as desired in any friendly territory, including isolated fortresses, subject to supply restrictions. Lines and strongpoints, I don't know what that means with the subject to supply restrictions and that you can put troops in them. Lines and strongpoints may freely be placed at this time. After the armies are deployed, the players may return any unwanted leaders to the pool and rearrange their remaining leaders as desired amongst their units. So you got to keep track of the leaders that you had from the last period. You can some of them here. They then can fill vacancies by drawing blindly from the pool, in which case you might get same shitty leaders back. Restrictions on building and deployment. There can never be more than one British army, and it must number at least 20 strength points at the beginning of a season, except in 1712, for some reason. I think the British go away in 1712 or something. There must always be at least one Dutch army of at least 40 strength points, including detachments, at the beginning of a season. Dutch forces may never enter the Empire. This is a little odd because these guys are Dutch and they start inside the Empire. They're in a really weird position. I feel like maybe something's wrong and maybe I got something in the wrong place. Oh, so these brown Dutch are just Dutch. They're not a separate force. Gotcha. Okay. I just saw that over in the counter mix. That's kind of annoying. That's kind of annoying because there's a hidden counters variant. Oh, where are we? No. Dutch forces may never enter the Empire if that would reduce the total number of Dutch strength points in the United Provinces, Cologne, the Spanish Netherlands, and France below 50. So we're okay. There must always be at least one Imperial army of at least 5 strength points. These are in addition to the restrictions of Section 8, political limitations, which had to do with who can cooperate with whom. I'm going to pause for a bit because I need to swap battery. And I might as well light a pipe. Not that I can keep it lit while I'm doing the rules. It's just too hard to do. All right. National rules. Bavaria. Oh, I missed something here. The Northern Allies form separate detachments placed at Kassel each year. See Section 8.2, the Northern Allies. Yeah, okay. They have their 20 points they produce. Bavaria ceases to be friendly to France if during an interphase the Allies hold all its fortresses and open cities. Now, we got to kind of look. Bavaria is this. If any are regained by actual French occupation and still held during an interphase, those areas of Bavaria not actually occupied by Allied forces revert to France. So that's pretty potent, actually. Bavaria is going to start pro-French. If the Allies conquer it completely, Bavaria stops being a country until the French take at least one city. United Provinces. If Amsterdamster can be captured and held until the next interphase, the United Provinces will become neutral and the Dutch forces disappear. The neutral area cannot be traversed by either side and its economic value is no longer used. The British can continue the war from coastal fortresses in France or the Spanish Netherlands at full value. If none are available, they must operate with the Northern Allies and their off-board value is dropped to 30. The Holy Rolling Empire. Each turn after a French primary magazine is placed at Passau, SS-54. This is an annoying form of finding things, but you basically have to trace along the hex grid and the numbers correspond here. So you do one hex line this way and one directly along the hex grid that way. Very difficult to cope with, but and so these are one thing, but the x-axis essentially cuts here, so they keep going up here, and actually A is over here or something. I don't know where. A is here, B is here, C is here, and then it goes straight down the map. Yeah, it took me a couple moments to figure out. Okay, so each turn after a French primary magazine is placed at Passau and a French army has exited towards Vienna, R55, double R55, double S, and double T55. Okay, this is 55. R is here, so along this line is the only way you can exit towards Austria. The French player may roll 2 dice consulting this table. A V signifies the defeat of Austria. The imperial forces are removed and the economic value of the empire is reduced to 0 except for Bavaria. Oh, I'm sorry. All economic values in the empire are reduced to 0 except for Bavaria. If the French magazine is lost or moved while the French are off board, half their force is lost and the rest demoralized for 6 turns. They may return voluntarily, being placed at Passau at the end of their move. The Northern Allies. As long as any of the Allies remain, the Northern Allies will continue the war. Tory ascendancy. If the war continues until 1712, a Tory government comes to power in England. The British forces are reduced to 12 SP and placed under Ormond. Nah, I can't put a leader on the board for this because he could show up anyway. It is also subject to the restrictions of the 1712 scenario, which we'll have to look up. This does not reduce the value of England in the 1711 to 12 interphase. The Dutch and British both become neutral in 1713, along with any Allied fortresses in Cologne, the Spanish Netherlands, and France west of column 16. '16 is here. The Empire and the Northern Allies will continue until the end of the game in 1713. So basically there's 1 year without the French. Correct? Or is it 2? It's 2 years without the French. Okay, or without the English. And the Dutch. Campaign victory conditions. If both the United Provinces and the Empire are defeated, the British make peace immediately for a French total victory and the game ends. If only one of them is defeated by the end of 1713, the French win a partial victory. The Allies can only win a total victory by capturing Paris and holding it until the interface. Yeah, good luck with that, man. Good luck. If the Allies should hold Toul, Lille, or Amiens during any interphase, the French player has the option to concede a partial victory. The Allies may refuse in the hope of attaining a total victory. If the Allies decline, the French gain an off-board economic bonus of 20 in that and all succeeding interphases. This offer may only be made once. If neither side achieves a partial or total victory, the result is a tie. The players may wish to determine marginal victory by using the victory conditions for each year and adding it up. There's some options of shorter campaign rules, campaign games. And then there's some optional rules. Concealed strengths. You can conceal the strength of your forces unless on the same hex as an enemy force or fort. The defender still has the option to retreat after the enemy strength is revealed, though. An army or detachment may attempt to force march. A die is rolled to determine how many extra movement points the unit will move. A second die is rolled to determine the unit's losses. If the unit loses 1 SP times the number on the second die for each group of 10 strength points or fraction thereof. So, for example, a unit with 15 that rolls a 3 would lose 6. Yes, twice the die roll. because it's more than 10 and less than 20, or less than 21. The coup de main. During each interphase, between the exchange phase and the build phase, each side may attempt a single coup de main. An enemy fortress or strongpoint is selected, a force equal in size to the total garrison of the fortress is laid out, and a leader is appointed. A die is rolled, and on a 1 you get a disaster, on a 6 you get a success. A success means the hostile fortress is entered, its commander is taken prisoner, and the garrison must defend in a normal battle or attempt retreat with a 6-2 leader equivalent. If they retire, the defenders suffer winter attrition. If they neither retreat nor rout, the attacker must retire. Disaster result means that the defender captures the whole raiding party without a fight. The attacker in a coup de main always suffers winter attrition after all battle is resolved. Even if captured, I guess. The attacker may modify his role if he has the superior officer. However, a 1 is always a disaster. Cohorn. If Cohorn, the Dutch general, is present at a siege as commander or co-commander of the besieging army, modify the result by 1 level in his favor. And he has nice siege levels, siege ratings in Europa Universalis too. Not, Vauban level, but... And that's a very rare capability, and it's just really potent in that game. Dutch political interference. The Dutch deputies often interfered in operations. Whenever a force in which one of the co-commanders is Dutch, co-commanders, is Dutch, wishes to move against or intercept an enemy force, not fortress, in the Spanish Netherlands, Cologne, or the Empire. Where is Cologne? Because this has come up a couple of times. Lorraine. I don't know where Cologne is. I wish they had given me a... or I knew better my geography. There we go. Here's Cologne. And it doesn't include the city of Cologne. It's just the Episcopal lands. What were we at there? If the Dutch wish to move against or intercept an enemy force in the Spanish Netherlands, Cologne, or the Empire, but not France or the United Provinces, reduce the activation value of the force by 1. If the force is entirely Dutch, reduce it by 2. This does not affect retreats or sieges. Also, in scenarios 10.1 through 10.9, the Dutch First Army cannot move more than 5 movement points into the Empire. And the Dutch may never reduce their forces in the United Provinces. The Spanish Netherlands, Cologne, and France, beyond the 1702 start lines, below a total of 50 strength points. This is not an optional roll. This is in effect there. And now we have, unless all forces total to less than 50 strength points. We're going to have to figure that out, but I think there's already essentially a rule in the core rules that said this. Back, I don't remember where. Was it in the... political limitations, right? I thought this... I seem to remember hitting this rule already. I don't know. Anyway, we're playing with it. If we can remember. Prolonged siege. Each consecutive complete turn an army spends besieging a fortress after the first, with no movement points expended outside the fortress hex, it may modify its siege result by 1 level. This effect is cumulative. Place a red number counter under the army to indicate the length of an unbroken siege. I may use some other... Again, these are serving too many purposes. I may use something else. Relief of commission. If a force is routed in battle, any one of the co-commanders, not necessarily the highest, can be relieved for incompetence. Roll one die to determine if the leader is immediately removed, removed to the next movement phase, movement phase after next, and then not removed due to royal favor. Princes of the Blood. Burgundy, Orleans, and Luxembourg cannot be removed for incompetence. They are always supreme of whatever forces they're stacked with, even if originally drawn for a detachment. Once placed on an army, they outrank the original commander and cannot be removed. I assume they swap commands. The same rule applies to the royal favorite, Villeroy. However, Villeroy can be relieved under the relief of commission here. If they are in the same force, they take precedence in the order listed, which, yeah. A superseded army commander can assume command of a detachment as a subordinate commander. They say can. Maybe you can choose to send them off in a huff if they suck. Automatic activation for moving into fortresses. Allow units to be automatically activated for interception when an enemy force moves into a friendly fortress hex. Again, I believe that was part of the core rules. All right. So we can see there are some serious problems with the way the rules present. However, for all, that one can kind of harsh on them, I feel like a pretty good concept of what this game is supposed to play as comes across. What I feel kind of doesn't succeed as much is they're not giving you the play aids that you need to play this effectively. I mean, these little counters are simply not enough to keep track of all the information that you have to do. The idea of contemporaneous movement is... I've seen it in a few games, and I always kind of don't really believe it, right? It's like, you can't really do that. It's got to kind of be take your hands off a stack and you can't keep moving. Otherwise, it just becomes a nightmare of keeping track of stuff. In essence, though, as long as the concept is there, every now and then you might fall back to having to use it. But for the most part, you will not use that concept. But it's present and it is a rule. So some of the other things, yeah, I'm going to probably be pulling out markers. I may have like little siege markers, maybe little cubes or something like that. I don't know what I have down here. Otherwise, I'll have to grab other stuff. I know I've used dice and stuff like that to mark this. I could use my little sneeze dice for it, which works pretty well. So we'll give this a shot. Like I said, this was on my short list because I remember it really impressing me in some ways. And it's not just that the rules are so badly written, yet seem to convey what they're trying to say. I think with a little bit of effort, we've gotten across most of the ideas there. Some of it is hidden in examples and shit like that. I hate that kind of stuff, but yeah. And again, this is not a game I would take and say, hey, let's play this to a buddy or something. Because it's just in such bad shape. But I feel kind of the same way about Europa Universalis, and I have brought other players in to play that. And I certainly don't feel like this is as broken as Pax Britannica is in terms of its timing mechanisms. But that was a favorite game of our group. So what can I say? You can't really tell these things. I think it's playable. I also think that I did not make it through a complete game of it, and I don't know if that was because one side or the other ended up winning automatic victories, or if I just gave up out of kind of a boredom. I kind of suspect it's the latter, but I'm not positive. I mean, it would be really odd for me. I've played this a couple of times. It would be really odd for me to abandon a game so many times. I can tell you there are some games that I've done that with. And I can, the Central Front series, which is also on my short list and has been for all this time.
The Central Front series is one of those things that, like, you know, but that was just huge and annoying. This, I have fond memories of this, man.